The HOA president who kept stealing my packages just learned a painful and very colorful lesson. She thought my porch was her personal shopping mall with a simple excuse: if it's left outside, it's fair game. So I left her a special delivery: a decoy package rigged with a trap that would cover her in neon green dye and glitter, live on camera, for the entire neighborhood to see. This is how I took back our street. Limited edition cosmic comets, deep blue, silver streaks, tiny scuff on the left toe. I shot 100 photos, boxed them, and set the empty shipping box out for pickup. The shoes stayed inside. I thought they were safe. Karen Hullen ran our HOA like a hobby dictatorship. Vague rules, real fines. Grant, her teenage echo with a moped and a smirk, lived for attention. I kept my head down. The next morning, the shipping box was gone. I shrugged, probably picked up early, and got back to work. It was 2 days later that the cold, hard reality of the situation slapped me in the face. I was watering my petunias, a shade of purple Karen probably found unruly, but hadn't found me for yet when I saw him. Grant Hulland swaggering down the sidewalk with his friends. A little too loud, a little too obnoxious. And on his feet, a pair of deep blue sneakers with shimmering silver streaks. My cosmic comets. I felt the watering can slip a little in my hand. It couldn't be. It was just a coincidence, right? There were thousands of these shoes made. But then I saw it. A tiny scuff mark on the left toe. Something that had happened when I had stumbled over my own feet trying them on for the first time in my living room. My heart started pounding. It was a unique, tiny imperfection, like a fingerprint. Those were my shoes. These weren't just shoes. I'd camped out online for 6 hours to get them. They were a gift to myself for finally getting promoted. And now they were on the feet of this smirking little jerk who probably thought they were just regular old sneakers. He caught me staring. He looked down at his feet, then back up at me and gave me the smug, most punchable grin I have ever seen in my life. He knew. He absolutely knew. He lifted his foot, admired the shoe as if he were seeing it for the first time, and then winked at me before turning and laughing with his friends. I checked the foyer. The shoebox I'd set by the door was gone. Karen's midday shrub inspection yesterday. That's when she slipped in and took them. I'd left the front door propped open for 10 minutes, hauling mulch. She only needed 30 seconds. The rage that filled me was hot and immediate. I wanted to march over there, grab him by his designer t-shirt, and demand my property back. But I knew how that would end. He'd cry foul. Mommy Dearest would come screeching out of her perfectly manicured fortress of a house. And suddenly, I'd be the villain. I'd be the crazy guy harassing a poor innocent teenager. Karen would probably find me for aggressive gardening or something equally absurd. My best friend Dave had always warned me about letting my temper get the best of me. Think it through, Mike. He'd say, don't give them an excuse. So I stood there, frozen, watering dripping onto the pavement, and watched my prized possessions walk away on the feet of a thief. The injustice of it was a physical thing, a knot tightening in my stomach. This wasn't just about a pair of sneakers anymore. This was about a bully who thought he could take whatever he wanted without consequences, backed by a mother who ruled our neighborhood like her own private kingdom. I turned off the water, went inside, and sat down at my kitchen table, my mind racing. They thought I was just another quiet resident who would roll over and take it. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't going to get angry. I was going to get smart. This little family dynasty of petty theft and tyranny had just made its last mistake, and it was currently scuffing up the evidence all over the neighborhood sidewalk. The game, as they say, was on. But first, I had to be smarter than them. And that meant following the rules they so gleefully ignored. I needed to build a case so solid, so undeniable that even Karen couldn't wiggle her way out of it. The question wasn't if I was going to get my shoes back. It was how I was going to make them regret ever setting eyes on my porch. I called Dave. Don't swing. Trap them, he said. He was right. I'd document everything and make the proof undeniable. They had drawn first blood, but I was about to build a case that would show everyone in the neighborhood what the Hullens were really all about. The first step was to establish a pattern. This single incident, as infuriating as it was, could be dismissed. Grant could claim he bought them himself. Karen would back him up, probably producing a fake receipt she printed in her craft room. I needed more, so I started a log. I bought a crisp new notebook and a pen with dark official-looking black ink. I labeled the first page the HOA file. It felt a little dramatic, but it also felt good. I wrote down the date and time my package was delivered, citing the email confirmation from the shipping company. I wrote down the date and time I first noticed it was missing. And then, with great painstaking detail, I described the encounter with Grant. I drew a little sketch of the shoe, circling the location of the unique scuff mark. It was cathartic. I was no longer just a victim of a random porch pirate. I was an investigator building a case. I was taking control. Little did I know, my little notebook was about to get very, very full because the humans were just getting started. The sneaker incident wasn't an isolated event. It was an opening salvo in a war I didn't even know I was fighting. And the next battle was going to hit even closer to home, proving that their audacity knew no bounds. My little Hewlin files started to fill up faster than I could have imagined. After the sneaker incident, it was like they had painted a target on my house. A few days later, I got an official HOA violation notice taped to my front door. My crime? My garden hose was improperly coiled. I stared at the hose. It was coiled. Maybe not in the perfect concentric circles that Karen dreamed of, but it was far from a mess. The fine was $50. I paid it, but not before taking a picture of the hose, printing it out, and stapling it to a new page in my logbook, along with a copy of the violation. A week after that, another notice appeared. This time, my mailbox flag was allegedly left in the up position for more than 24 hours. A violation of a rule so obscure, I was pretty sure Karen had just made it up. Another $50. Another entry in the file. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. Each fine was small enough that fighting it would be more trouble than it was worth, which was exactly how Karen wanted it. She was bleeding us dry, $50 at a time, for offenses that were either imaginary or ridiculously petty. I started talking to my neighbors quietly at first. I'd catch old Mr. Henderson while he was getting his mail and ask him if he'd had any similar issues. His eyes lit up with a weary kind of anger. That woman, he grumbled, fined me because my wind chimes were, and I quote, creating tonal discord. They were a gift from my late wife. Mrs. Gable from across the street told me she was fine because her welcome mat had faded from a vibrant teal to a distressed aqua, which apparently wasn't on the approved color palette. Every conversation revealed a new layer of Karen's tyrannical reign. She wasn't just enforcing rules. She was inventing them to punish people she didn't like, or more often than not for no reason at all. It was clear she got a thrill out of the power it gave her. The money from the fines, we were told, went into the Neighborhood Beautification Fund. But the only thing getting beautified was Karen's own front yard, which suddenly sported a brand new, professionally installed fountain that looked suspiciously expensive. The real escalation happened about a month after my sneakers disappeared. My nephew's birthday was coming up, and I had ordered him a big fancy Lego set, one of those massive ones that takes a week to build. It was delivered while I was on a work call. I got the notification on my phone and figured I'd grab it in a few minutes. But when I went on the porch, the space where the large, clearly marked box should have been was empty. My heart sank. Not again. I scanned the street, a sick feeling growing in my gut. And then I saw him. Grant struggling to shove a large rectangular box into the back of his mom's SUV parked down the street. I couldn't see the logo from that distance, but the size and shape were unmistakable. He wasn't even being subtle about it. He saw me watching, gave a little shrug, and slammed the trunk shut. This time, I didn't hesitate. The sneakers were one thing. They were my property, and it was infuriating. But when I saw him stealing that Lego set, that was different. That was for my nephew's birthday. I could already picture his face lighting up. And this kid was just tossing it in a trunk like it was trash. That wasn't just theft, it was a special kind of cruel. That was a level of brazen theft that I couldn't ignore. I pulled out my phone and immediately dialed the non-emergency police number. I knew from a legal standpoint I didn't have much. I hadn't seen him take it from my porch, only put a similar-looking box in his car, but I needed to make a report. I needed to get this on the record. I explained the situation to the dispatcher calmly and clearly. I mentioned the previous incident with the sneakers. I gave them Grant's name and address. The dispatcher was polite but noncommittal. "We can send an officer to take a report," she said. "But without video evidence or a witness who saw him on your property, there's not much we can do." I knew she was right, but I insisted. "I understand," I said. "But I need this documented. I want a police report number. This is a pattern of behavior." An hour later, a tired-looking officer showed up at my door. I walked him through everything, showing him the delivery confirmation email for the Lego set and my now-growing Holland file. He was sympathetic but realistic. He took my statement, looked over my notes, and gave me a weary sigh. "Honestly, sir," he said, "HA disputes are a nightmare. And this sounds like a classic case of harassment on top of petty theft. You're doing the right thing by documenting everything." He went over to Karen's house, and I watched from my window as she came to the door, all feigned innocence and polite concern. She put a hand to her chest, looking shocked that anyone could accuse her sweet, angelic Grant of such a thing. A few minutes later, the officer came back. "She denies everything, of course," he said, shaking his head. "Says her son was just cleaning out the garage. There's no box in the car now." Without more, my hands are tied. But he did give me what I wanted, a case number. Case 124. I wrote it huge in the Hewlin file. It was a small victory, but it was a crucial one. I now had an official police report. Karen's little crime spree was no longer just a neighborhood squabble. It was a matter of public record. That night, I updated my file. I wrote down the date, the time, the item stolen, and the official police report number in big, bold letters. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. Karen and Grant might think they were untouchable, that they could hide behind the HA's bylaws and their own web of lies. But they were getting sloppy. They were getting arrogant. And their arrogance was creating a trail of evidence that was leading right back to their front door. The police were sympathetic, but their hands were tied without proof. And that's when I realized documentation wasn't enough. To catch a thief, you need a trap. And I was going to build the most glorious, humiliating trap our neighborhood had ever seen. Those two words became my new mantra. It was clear that my notebook, as therapeutic as it was, wasn't going to be enough. I needed something undeniable. I needed to catch them in the act. The problem was Karen was observant. A big, obvious security camera would just get me another fine for unapproved exterior modification. I needed something discreet, something she wouldn't even notice. I spent that evening diving into a rabbit hole of home security forums and tech blogs. I learned about pinhole cameras, battery-powered spy cams, and devices disguised as everything from rocks to garden gnomes. I was determined to turn my front porch into a high-tech surveillance zone that looked exactly like the same old boring porch it had always been. I grabbed 2 sugar cube cams by a store pickup, one hidden in the door frame, one in a birdhouse. By Sunday, I had a clean 2-angle porch view, invisible from the street. Now I just needed bait. But just catching them wasn't enough. A video of Grant swiping a box would be good, but it was still his word against mine about what was inside. Karen would just claim it was a misunderstanding that he thought it was a delivery for them. I needed to take it a step further. I needed to create a situation so spectacular, so undeniable that it would be impossible for them to lie their way out of it. And that's when the idea for the decoy package started to form. It couldn't just be any package. It had to be a trap. A glorious, petty, and utterly humiliating trap. My mind immediately went to glitter bombs. I'd seen videos online, and the sheer chaos of them was beautiful. But I had to be smart about it. I couldn't use anything that could cause actual harm, or I'd be the one facing charges. Everything had to be safe, non-toxic, and most importantly, effective. This part of the plan required a specialist. My neighbor, 2 doors down, a retired engineer named Mitch, was my guy. Uncle Mitch, as the neighborhood kids called him, was a bit of a tinkerer. His garage was a wonderland of wires, gadgets, and half-finished projects. He was also one of the few people on the block who despised Karen Holland with a passion that matched my own. He'd once been fined for having a satellite dish that was, according to Karen, too far to the left. I went over to his house with a six-pack of his favorite craft beer and laid out my plan. His eyes, which were usually half closed in a state of sleepy amusement, widened with delight. A glitter bomb? He cackled for Karen. Michael, my boy, this is the best idea you've ever had. We're going to make it a work of art. We spent the next week designing the perfect package. Mitch was a genius. He engineered a spring-loaded system using a simple plastic container. The lid would be held down by the flaps of the cardboard box. When the box was opened, first spring-loaded arms would pop up, flinging the contents everywhere. For the contents, we settled on a custom blend. First, the glitter. We used biodegradable craft-grade glitter. It was important to me that we weren't going to be harming the environment while we enacted our petty revenge. We chose the most vibrant, obnoxious colors we could find. Neon green, hot pink, and electric blue. All skin-safe, water-based dye, and a low-pressure spring cleared with the non-emergency line before I set it out. But glitter alone wasn't enough. We needed something that would stick around. Mitch suggested a skin-safe, water-based, theatrical dye, the kind of stuff they use in movies. We found a brilliant Hulk green color. We mixed it with the glitter and a bit of cornstarch to create a fine, sticky powder. The moment that box opened, the thief wouldn't just be sparkled, they'd be stained. The final touch, the piece of resistance, was the tracker. This was my idea. I wanted to know where my packages were really going. I bought a tiny GPS tracker, the kind people put on their keychains or in their luggage. It was about the size of a quarter. We carefully embedded it in the bottom of the decoy device, ensuring it wouldn't be damaged when the glitter bomb went off. The trap was complete. We placed the device inside a standard cardboard box, taped it up, and printed a fake shipping label from a fancy high-end electronics brand. It looked like an expensive pair of headphones or a new tablet, something too tempting for a porch pirate to resist. I placed the package on my porch in full view of my new hidden cameras. I set up my recording system and settled into wait. It was like fishing, but instead of a fish, I was hoping to catch a Karen. Every car that drove by, every person who walked down the street made my heart jump. The anticipation was a knot in my stomach. Was this crazy? Was I going too far? Then I thought about my sneakers, my nephew's Lego set, and all the ridiculous finds. No, this wasn't too far. This was justice. And I had a feeling justice was about to get very, very green. The decoy package sat on my porch for 2 full days. It was a nerve-wracking wait. Every time I looked out the window and saw it sitting there, a fresh wave of anxiety and excitement washed over me. I reviewed the camera footage from the first night. Nothing. Just a stray cat and a raccoon who seemed very interested in my recycling bin. I started to worry, what if they didn't take the bait? What if some random innocent delivery person tried to pick it up thinking it was a return? I had put a small discreet note on the bottom of the box that read, "Not a return." Awaiting resident just in case, but the fear of an innocent casualty in my petty war was real. Dave called to check in. "Any luck?" he asked. "Nothing yet," I sighed. "I'm starting to think I've just built a very sparkly, very expensive paperweight." Dave chuckled. "Patience, my friend. A true villain can't resist a monologue, and a true thief can't resist a well-placed box. She'll crack." He was right. On the 3rd day, it happened. I was in my home office pretending to work, but really just watching the live feed from my porch cameras on a second monitor. It was late afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the lawn. A familiar silver SUV pulled up to the curb in front of my house. Karen Juan's car. My heart started hammering against my ribs. This was it. She got out of the driver's side, clutching her ever-present clipboard. She did a slow, deliberate walk down the sidewalk, pretending to inspect the landscaping of the house next door. She glanced at my house, her eyes lingering on the package for just a second too long. It was a terrible acting job. She was trying to look casual, but she moved with the predatory stillness of a shark that's just spotted a seal. She made a show of checking her phone, then looked up and down the street. It was quiet. Most people were still at work. She must have thought the coast was clear.
With one last furtive glance around, she marched directly up my walkway onto my porch and snatched the box. She didn't even break her stride. It was a smooth, practiced motion. She tucked the box under her arm, turned, and walked briskly back to her car, the clipboard now abandoned on the passenger seat. The whole thing took less than 10 seconds. I had it all on video from 2 different angles in glorious high definition. I watched her pull away, a triumphant, giddy feeling bubbling up inside me. Phase 1 was complete. Now for the fireworks, I immediately pulled up the app for the GPS tracker. A small blue dot appeared on a map of our neighborhood. It was moving. It traveled the 2 blocks to her house and then stopped right inside the geographic outline of her property. Perfect. I waited. The suspense was killing me. I imagined the scene. Karen, flushed with victory, carrying her ill-gotten gains into her pristine beige-colored foyer.
She'd place it on her granite countertop, maybe grab a letter opener to slice the tape with surgical precision, anticipating the expensive electronics inside.
I had my phone ready, aimed at my front window, which had a clear view of her front door across the street. I didn't know what would happen, but I had a feeling I'd want to be recording it. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Nothing. I started to get nervous again. Did the mechanism fail? Did she get suspicious and decide to open it in the garage? And then it happened. I heard a faint popping sound, quickly muffled. It was followed by a shriek of pure, unfiltered rage that was so loud I could hear it clearly from across the street. She opened it in her entry. The tracker cam heard the pop. Then she burst onto the porch, glowing neon green and screaming. She wasn't just dusted with it. She was coated. She looked like a radioactive swamp monster who had just lost a fight with a unicorn. Her face was a mask of disbelief and fury. She had green glitter in her hair, on her face, down her shirt. Her hands were bright, Hulk green from the dye. She stumbled out onto her porch, sputtering and clawing at her face, which only succeeded in smearing the green dye into a more uniform, ghastly shade. She looked around wildly, as if trying to figure out where the attack had come from. Her eyes locked onto my house. I was still filming with my phone, trying my best to stifle my laughter. She saw me. Our eyes met from across the street. The look on her face was pure, unadulterated hatred. She pointed a trembling, bright green finger at me and screamed something incoherent. A string of curses lost to the wind. It was the single most beautiful thing I had ever seen. The thumbnail moment. The great and powerful Karen Hewland, HOA president and neighborhood tyrant, standing on her own front porch looking like a Muppet that had exploded. I saved the video, a wide grin spreading across my face. She had taken the bait, sprung the trap, and now she was wearing the evidence. But this was just the beginning.
The little blue dot on my GPS app was still active, and I had a strong suspicion that the decoy package wasn't the only thing she had stashed away. It was time to find out just how deep this rabbit hole went. The sight of Karen glowing like a discount superhero was incredibly satisfying. But I knew the green dye and glitter, as hilarious as they were, wouldn't be enough to truly bring her down. The dye would wash off. The glitter would eventually be vacuumed up. I needed something more permanent, something that pointed to a crime bigger than just swiping a single package off my porch. The GPS tracker was the key. While Karen was busy trying to scrub herself clean, I was glued to my computer screen, watching the little blue dot. For the rest of the afternoon, it stayed put inside her house. I imagined her frantically trying to get rid of the evidence, probably stuffing the glitter-spewing box into 5 layers of trash bags. I used the time to back up the footage from my porch cameras to 3 different cloud services. I also sent a copy to Dave with the subject line, "It is done." His reply was a single perfect emoji, a chef's kiss. Around 9 o'clock that night, something changed. The blue dot started moving. It left her house, got into a car, and started traveling across town. My heart leaped. This was it. This was the lead I was hoping for. She wasn't just taking it to a dumpster. She was taking it somewhere specific. I grabbed my keys, hopped in my car, and started following the tracker on my phone's map. I was careful to stay several blocks behind, driving slowly, my headlights off whenever I could. I felt like a private investigator in a cheap detective novel. The tracker led me away from our pristine suburban neighborhood and into a more industrial part of town, an area filled with warehouses, auto body shops, and self-storage facilities. The dot finally came to a stop at a place called Lock It Up Self-Storage. It was a large, sprawling complex surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. I parked my car across the street in the parking lot of a closed-down diner and watched. The entrance gate was illuminated by a single flickering floodlight. A few minutes later, Karen's silver SUV pulled up to the keypad. The gate slid open and she drove inside. I couldn't see which unit she went in from my position, but I didn't have to. The GPS tracker was pinpointing her location to a specific row of units in the back corner of the facility. She was inside for about 15 minutes. When her SUV emerged, the gate closed behind her and she drove off in the direction of our neighborhood. The blue dot representing my glittery decoy was now stationary inside one of those storage units. I waited until her tail lights had completely disappeared before I got out of my car. I knew I couldn't go onto the property. That would be trespassing, and it would nullify any evidence I found. I had to be smart. I walked along the public sidewalk that ran alongside the facility's fence. I stayed on the sidewalk, lensed through the door gap. No step onto their property. "This is a fence, not customs," I said. Luckily, the back corner where the tracker was located was visible from the street. The units in that section were old with the kind of roll-up doors that left a small gap at the bottom.
I found the unit that corresponded with the GPS signal. I knelt down on the sidewalk, my phone's flashlight off, and peered through the dark gap between the concrete floor and the metal door. What I saw made my blood run cold. It wasn't just my decoy package. It wasn't just a few boxes. It was a warehouse. Floor to ceiling, a mountain of stolen Amazon boxes, Zappos, Best Buy, Target. All the packages from our street, from who knows how long. It was a treasure trove of stolen goods. I could see shipping labels on some of the boxes near the front, and though I couldn't make out the names clearly, I knew exactly where they had come from. This wasn't petty theft anymore. This was her side business. This was an organized, systematic operation. They had been stealing packages from the entire neighborhood for who knows how long. The beautification fund wasn't being funded by $50 fines for improperly coiled hoses. It was being funded by reselling stolen electronics, clothes, and who knows what else. To top it all off, I could see a faint, unmistakable shimmer coating several of the boxes near the door. The neon green glitter from my decoy had dusted everything like a sparkly fingerprint marking the scene of the crime. I pulled out my phone and started recording, holding it steady against the fence. I filmed the unit number C27 clearly visible on the door. I filmed the stacks of boxes inside, narrating quietly what I was seeing. I made sure to get a clear shot of the public sidewalk I was standing on, establishing that I was not trespassing. I also had another tool. Uncle Mitch, in his infinite wisdom, had suggested adding a little something extra to our glitter mixture, a fine invisible UV powder. He'd given me a small, powerful UV flashlight. I clicked it on and pointed the beam through the gap. The inside of the unit lit up. The lock and pull bar glowed too. The same powder Karen carried out of her foyer. The glitter glowed, of course, but so did a fine dusting of powder on dozens of other boxes, proving they had been in close proximity to my opened decoy. More importantly, I could see a clear trail of tiny glowing specks leading from the door of the unit back towards the main driveway. Karen had left a magical invisible breadcrumb trail of evidence. I had everything I needed. The video from my porch showing her stealing the package, the GPS data tracking her to this exact location, and now video evidence of a storage unit full of stolen goods, all linked together by my glorious glittery trap. My heart was pounding with adrenaline. This was so much bigger than a pair of sneakers. This woman was a criminal hiding in plain sight, using her HOA presidency as a cover. I stopped recording, saved the file, and called with case number 14,792 and the unit location. "Hello," I said, my voice steady and calm. "I'd like to update a police report. My case number is..." I gave the officer the number from the Lego theft. "I believe I've located the stolen property and a whole lot more." The dispatcher's tone shifted from bored to interested. I explained what I had found, where I was, and the evidence I had collected. She told me to stay where I was and that she was dispatching officers to my location. As I hung up the phone, a grim smile spread across my face. Karen Hoolan thought she was just stealing a pair of headphones. She had no idea she had just led me to the end of her entire criminal enterprise. The walls were closing in and they were covered in glitter.
While I waited for the police to arrive at the storage facility, I sat in my car, my mind racing. I had her. The evidence was overwhelming, but I knew Karen. She was a cornered animal, and cornered animals are at their most dangerous. She wouldn't go down without a fight. The police arrived in 2 patrol cars, their lights off. As they pulled into the diner parking lot next to me, I met with the 2 officers, a man and a woman, who looked professional and serious. I showed them everything on my phone. The porch camera footage of Karen taking the package, the GPS log tracking her to this unit, and the video I had just taken through the gap in the door. I also showed them the UV flashlight Uncle Mitch had given me. The male officer, whose name tag read Sergeant Miller, raised an eyebrow. UV powder? That's clever. They confirmed they couldn't enter the unit without a warrant, but my evidence was more than enough to get one.
Sergeant Miller made a call, and I could hear him laying out the details to a judge. While he was on the phone, the other officer, Officer Chen, took my official statement. She was meticulous, asking for specific times and details which I was happy to provide from my Huland file app on my phone.
They were impressed with the level of documentation. "You've done most of our job for us," Officer Chen said with a small smile. The warrant was approved verbally over the phone, and with that, things started moving quickly. They called for a forensics team and a detective. They couldn't just cut the lock. It had to be processed as a crime scene. I gave them my contact information, and they told me they would be in touch. As I drove home, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. It was out of my hands now in the best possible way. The professionals had taken over. The next morning, I woke up feeling like a new man. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel a sense of dread when I looked out my front window. But the peace didn't last long. Around noon, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw 2 large, imposing men standing on my porch. They were both wearing black polo shirts with a cheap-out-looking embroidered logo that said HOA Security. I had lived in the neighborhood for 5 years and had never seen or heard of an official HOA security patrol. There isn't one in our bylaws. These were Karen's hired muscle. They looked more like bouncers from a seedy nightclub than neighborhood watch. One was tall and lanky with a sour expression. The other was built like a refrigerator and was cracking his knuckles. I opened the door, leaving the chain on. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. The refrigerator-sized one spoke, his voice a low rumble. "Michael Apprentice, we're with HOA Security. The president, Miss Holland, has received a complaint about unauthorized surveillance equipment on your property." I had to give Karen credit. She was bold. Even with her criminal enterprise on the verge of collapse, she was still trying to use the HOA to intimidate me. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said calmly. "Also, I've never seen you before. Can I see some identification?" The lanky one sneered. "Where's the identification?" He pointed a thick finger at my doorbell camera. "That's a violation. We're here to ensure compliance." It was a clear threat. They weren't security. They were thugs she had hired to scare me. My blood started to boil, but I remember Dave's advice. Stay calm. Don't give them an excuse. "Look, guys," I said, "if you have an official HOA matter to discuss, you can send me a letter just like Karen usually does. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm busy." I started to close the door, but the big guy put his hand on it, stopping it. "We're not done here," he growled. I knew this was a critical moment. If I backed down, they'd know they could push me around. If I got aggressive, I'd be the one in trouble, so I didn't either. I took a small step back from the door, pulled out my phone, and hit record. "You're preventing me from closing my door, and you're refusing to leave my property," I said, my voice loud and clear, making sure the phone's microphone picked it up. "I am asking you to leave now." Just then, my neighbor, Mr. Henderson, came out to get his mail. He saw the 2 goons on my porch, and the look of concern on his face was obvious. He immediately pulled out his own phone and started recording from his driveway. The sight of a second camera seemed to rattle them. They exchanged a nervous glance. The lanky one tried to regain control. "You need to come with us. We need to inspect the gate at the back of your property." It was a ridiculous premise. My back gate. I decided to call their bluff. "Fine," I said. "Let's go inspect the gate, but I'm going to be recording this entire interaction for my own safety." I unlatched the chain, stepped out, and started walking towards the side of my house. Phone held up high. They followed, looking less confident now. We reached the wooden gate that led to my backyard. It was perfectly fine. Looks good to me, I said cheerfully. Inspection complete. Now, please get off my property. That's when the big one lost his patience. He stepped forward and shoved me hard against the gate. It wasn't enough to hurt me, but it was enough to knock me off balance. The gate swung open and I stumbled back. You think you're so smart with your cameras? He snarled, taking a step towards me. But before he could do anything else, Mr. Henderson's voice boomed from the driveway. I got that. I got the whole thing on video. That's assault. The two thugs froze. They looked over at Mr. Henderson, then back at me. They saw my phone was still recording. The color drained from their faces. They had crossed the line and they knew it. They had been hired to intimidate, not to get caught on camera committing a crime. Without another word, they turned and practically ran off my property, got into an unmarked sedan parked down the street, and sped away. I took a deep breath, my adrenaline surging. I had them. I had Karen's hired muscle on video, trespassing, intimidating, and assaulting me. I thanked Mr. Henderson profusely. He just nodded grimly. We're all sick of her, son. It's time someone finally stood up to that woman. He emailed me his video file right then and there. I now had a whole new chapter for the Hewlin file. Karen's attempt to scare me into silence had backfired spectacularly. It had only given me more evidence, and more importantly, it had shown me that my neighbors were ready to stand with me. This was no longer just my fight. It was ours, and we were just getting started. The encounter with Karen's hired goons was a turning point. It proved two things. First, that she was desperate, and second, that I wasn't alone. The video of the shove, captured from two angles, was the final piece of the puzzle I needed. It wasn't just about theft anymore. It was about a pattern of harassment and intimidation that affected the entire neighborhood. It was time to stop playing defense and go on the offensive. A legal by-the-book offensive, of course. I spent the next 2 days poring over our HA's bylaws. A document so dense and boring it could be used as a sleep aid. But buried deep within the legalese, I found it. Article 10, Section 4, the recall provision. It stated that any board member, including the president, could be removed from their position by a majority vote of the homeowners at a specially convened meeting. To call such a meeting, we needed a petition signed by just 25% of the homeowners. A plan began to form in my mind, a beautiful multi-stage plan. Step 1, gather the signatures. Step 2, officially serve the recall notices. Step 3, prepare a presentation for the meeting that would lay out the case against Karen so clearly and entertainingly that her removal would be a certainty. I printed out a stack of petitions. The heading was simple and direct. Petition for a special meeting to recall HOA, President Karen Holland, and the current board of directors.
I decided to go for the whole board. The treasurer and secretary had been her silent partners in crime for years, rubber stamping her every decision and turning a blind eye to her abuse of power. It was time for a clean sweep. Armed with my clipboard, a direct and I hoped ironic jab at Karen, I started going door to door. I didn't begin with the wild story of glitter bombs and storage units. I started with the common ground, the ridiculous fines. I knocked on Mrs. Gable's door first. "Hi, Mrs. Gable," I said. "I'm Michael from down the street. I was wondering if you had a minute to talk about the recent increase in HOA fines." Her eyes narrowed. "That woman fined me because my petunias were aggressively pink," she said, her voice tight with anger. I showed her the petition. "We're calling a meeting to hold her accountable," I explained. She signed it without a moment's hesitation, her signature a furious scribble on the page. It was the same story at every house. Mr.
Henderson and his tonal discord wind chimes. The young couple who were fined for their toddler's chalk drawings on the sidewalk, citing a rule against graffiti. The list went on and on.
My Hewlin file was thick. But the collective grievances of the neighborhood were a library of petty tyranny. Within 3 days, I had signatures from over half the households in our community, more than double the number I needed. People weren't just signing. They were thanking me. They were sharing their own stories of Karen's reign of terror. It was an outpouring of frustration that had been simmering just beneath the surface for years. While I was gathering signatures, I was also working on my presentation for the meeting. I didn't want it to be a dry, boring list of complaints. I wanted it to be a spectacle. I was preparing a PowerPoint slideshow, and petty and funny was the theme. The title slide read, HOA, A Journey into Madness. I had slides with pictures of the violations, Mr. Henderson's wind chimes, Mrs. Gable's faded welcome mat, my improperly coiled hose. I used goofy fonts and ridiculous clip art. I even found a sound effect of a cash register chang that I planned to play every time I mentioned a fine. But the second half of the presentation was all business. I had a slide with the police report numbers. I had a slide with a map showing the GPS tracker's journey from my porch to the storage unit.
And for the grand finale, I had the videos, the clip of Karen in all her green, glittery glory, screaming on her front porch, and the footage of her two security guards assaulting me on my own property. I embedded the videos directly into the slideshow. It was going to be a masterpiece of public shaming. With the signed petitions in hand, the next step was to serve the official notices. According to the bylaws, I had to deliver a formal notice of the recall meeting to each board member personally. I saved Karen for last. I walked up to her door, my own camera recording from my shirt pocket, and rang the bell. She opened it and her face went pale when she saw me. The green tint had mostly faded from her skin, but I could still see a faint greenish hue around her hairline and under her fingernails. Karen, I said, my voice polite but firm. Pursuant to Article X Section 4 of the HOA bylaws, I am serving you with this official notice. A special meeting has been called to discuss the recall of you and the entire board of directors. I handed her the envelope. She snatched it from my hand, her eyes burning with a cold fire. You have no idea what you've just done, she hissed. Oh, I think I do, I replied with a small smile. I'm holding you accountable. The meeting is in 1 week. Be there. I turned and walked away, not giving her the satisfaction of a longer confrontation. The stage was set. The invitations were sent. In 1 week, the whole neighborhood would gather in the community clubhouse, and I would present my case. Karen could bring her lies and her intimidation, but I was bringing something better. I was bringing receipts and a really, really funny slideshow. The night of the HOA meeting felt like the opening night of a Broadway show I'd been rehearsing for my entire life. The community clubhouse, usually reserved for sad potlucks and bingo nights, was packed. Every seat was taken, and people were standing along the walls. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. I saw faces from every house on the block. Mr. Henderson, Mrs. Gable, the couple with the chalk-drawing toddler. They were all there, a silent army ready for a revolution. Karen and her two board cronies, a perpetually nervous man named Stan, and a woman named Brenda, who always looked like she'd just smelled something bad, sat at a long table at the front of the room. Karen was trying to project an aura of calm authority, but I could see the tightness in her jaw and the way she kept fiddling with her pen. Her hands, I noticed, with immense satisfaction, still had a faint, sickly green tint under the fingernails. A little souvenir from our last encounter. The meeting started with Karen trying to control the narrative. She launched into a long rambling speech about the importance of community standards and the tireless work the board did to maintain property values. It was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak, and the crowd was not having it. People were shifting in their seats, whispering amongst themselves. Finally, she finished. Now, she said with a dismissive wave, I believe a Mr. Apprentice has called this special session. He has 5 minutes to air his grievances. She said grievances like it was a dirty word. I walked to the podium at the front of the room, my laptop in hand. I connected it to the projector. Thank you, Karen, I said, my voice calm and steady. 5 minutes isn't quite enough, so I hope everyone's comfortable. I've prepared a little presentation. I clicked the first slide into view. Our HOA, A Journey into Madness, appeared on the screen in a goofy, dripping font. A few people in the audience chuckled. Karen's face hardened. I started slow with the funny stuff. I showed the picture of my improperly coiled hose. Exhibit A. I announced a threat to public safety, apparently. $50 fine. Cha-ching. I played the sound effect from my laptop. More laughter. I went through a dozen other examples from our neighbors, each one more ridiculous than the last, each one punctuated by the cha-ching of the cash register. The mood in the room was shifting from tense to amused. People were laughing openly now, pointing at the screen, recognizing their own absurd fines. Karen was squirming. Then I shifted gears. But it's not all fun and games, is it? I said, my tone turning serious. The laughter died down. Chairs scraped. The room went pin-drop quiet. Time to roll tape. It's not just about silly fines. It's about a pattern of harassment, intimidation, and theft. A murmur went through the crowd. I put up the slide with the police report numbers. I told them about my sneakers. I told them about my nephew's Lego set. Karen stood up. This is slander. You have no proof, she screeched. Proof? I said, turning back to the podium. Karen, I have so much proof. For example, I have this. I clicked the button and the video of Karen, green and glittery, filled the screen. The room erupted. People gasped. Some were laughing hysterically. Others were just staring in stunned silence. The video played on a loop. Karen screaming, covered in the evidence of her crime. She sank back into her chair, her face the color of ash. Now, you might be wondering, I continued over the den. What was in that box? Well, it was a decoy, and it had a tracker. A tracker that led me somewhere very interesting. I showed them the map of the GPS journey to the storage facility. And then I played the video of the inside of Unit C27, filled to the brim with their stolen packages. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. People were looking at the screen, then at Karen, their faces a mixture of shock and fury. And when our president found out I was on to her, I said, my voice ringing with indignation, she sent these two gentlemen to my house to ensure compliance. I played the final video. The two thugs on my porch, the shove, Mr. Henderson's voice shouting from the driveway. That was it. The dam broke. The room exploded in a chorus of angry shouts. It was in that moment of chaos that Grant Holland, who had been sulking in the front row, finally snapped. His face was contorted with rage. With a wild yell, he lunged towards me at the podium. You're lying, he screamed, his hands reaching for me. I barely had time to react, but I didn't have to. The crowd did it for me. Mr. Henderson, who was closer than I thought, stuck out a leg and tripped him. Two other men from the back grabbed his arms and hauled him back to his seat. He fell into a folding chair. The chair folded first. It was over in a second. He was just a hot-headed kid, but the image of him lunging at me in front of the entire neighborhood sealed their fate. As the commotion died down, I reached under the podium. I had one last theatrical flourish planned. I pulled out a large manila envelope and a small party popper. Don't worry, folks. The show's not over, I announced. I tore open the envelope and tossed a stack of photocopied documents into the air. Pages from the HA's own financial ledgers that an anonymous source had slipped under my door showing huge, unexplained discretionary payments to Karen. As the papers fluttered down, I twisted the party popper. A shower of harmless silver confetti rained down over the documents. It was a much milder, funnier echo of the glitter bomb. It broke the tension and got a huge laugh. I had made my point. I had presented my evidence. And just as Karen stood up to scream another denial, a new sound cut through the noise of the room. The unmistakable wail of police sirens growing closer and closer. The sound of the siren sliced through the chaotic energy of the room, silencing everything. Every head turned towards the windows of the clubhouse. The flashing red and blue lights painted strobing patterns across the shocked faces of my neighbors. Two police cars and a larger unmarked van pulled up right outside. Parking on the manicured lawn, Karen was always so obsessed with protecting. The doors of the clubhouse swung open and Sergeant Miller, the officer I had met at the storage facility, walked in, followed by Officer Chin and two other uniformed officers. The room was so quiet you could hear the crackle of their radios. Sergeant Miller strode to the front, his expression grim and professional. He didn't look at me or the crowd. His eyes were locked directly on Karen Huand. Karen Holland, he said, his voice calm, but carrying an undeniable weight of authority. You are under arrest for suspicion of felony theft, possession of stolen property, and conspiracy. Officer Chen stepped forward and, in a smooth practice motion, instructed Karen to stand up and place her hands behind her back. The clicking sound of the handcuffs echoed in the silent room. Karen didn't scream or fight. All the bluster, all the arrogance had drained out of her. She looked small and defeated, her face a pale, slack mask of disbelief. As they led her away, a few green glitter flakes, remnants of her earlier humiliation, fell from her hair and shimmered on the floor under the harsh fluorescent lights. Grant, who had been sitting stone-faced since his failed lunge, was next. Because he was a minor, the officers handled him differently, but he was still taken into custody, officially detained as a person of interest in an ongoing investigation. He didn't look at his mother as they were led out to separate cars. The two remaining board members, Stan and Brenda, looked like they had seen a ghost. They were frozen in their seats, staring at the empty space where Karen had been. Sergeant Miller then turned his attention to the room. He cleared his throat and addressed the assembled homeowners. As some of you may now be aware, he began, an investigation has been underway regarding a significant number of package thefts in this community. Based on evidence provided by one of your neighbors, he nodded briefly in my direction. We were able to secure a warrant and raid a storage unit rented under Miss Hewlin's name. The unit holds over 200 stolen items, value north of 50 grand. He said, if you've lost a package in the last 6 months, use the claims portal on the police website. We'll match labels to owners for restitution. Sergeant Miller wasn't finished. He then addressed the incident with the HOA security thugs. We are also aware of an incident of assault and intimidation that occurred several days ago, he said, looking right at me. The two individuals involved have been identified and are also in custody. It appears they were hired by Ms. Hand using HOA funds, which opens up a whole other line of inquiry into financial mismanagement. He looked over at Stan and Brenda, who both seemed to shrink under his gaze. The HOA's financial records will be subpoenaed as part of this investigation. The look of pure terror on Stan and Brenda's faces was priceless. They had been content to ride Karen's coattails, and now they were about to be dragged down with her. The officers finished their announcement, answered a few questions from the homeowners, and then departed, leaving a stunned and buzzing community in their wake.
The formal purpose of the meeting, the recall, had been momentarily forgotten in the whirlwind of police activity. But now it was back at the forefront. I walked back to the podium. The room was abuzz with excited, angry chatter. All eyes were on me. I didn't need my slideshow anymore. The real-life drama had been far more effective. The case against Karen and her board wasn't just about petty fines anymore. It was about extensive, calculated criminal activity. The vote to recall them was no longer a question of if, but of how quickly we could make it official. The foundation of Karen's little kingdom had been built on a mountain of stolen Amazon boxes, and it had just come crashing down in the most public way imaginable. Now, it was up to us, the homeowners, to decide what to build in its place. With Karen and Grant gone and the police cars pulling away, a strange mix of relief and purpose settled over the clubhouse. The immediate threat was gone, but the power vacuum remained.
Stan and Brenda, the two remaining board members, were still sitting at the front table, looking like deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming train. They were complicit, and everyone in the room knew it.
Mr. Henderson was the first to speak, his voice usually quiet and reserved, now booming with newfound confidence. Well, he said, standing up and addressing the room. I believe we were in the middle of a recall vote. A chorus of agreement rose from the crowd. I stepped aside from the podium, allowing the community to take charge. This was their victory as much as it was mine. A paralegal from the third row stood and coolly ran the vote by the book. We didn't just recall Karen, we recalled the entire board. Stan and Brenda didn't argue. They packed their binders and skewered out to a chorus of hard silence. In 30 minutes, our HOA went from petty regime to no rulers at all. And honestly, it felt like oxygen. Then the young dad fed for his daughter's chalk art raised his hand. I moved that we petition the court to dissolve the current board structure and placed the association under a court-appointed receiver. He explained it fast and clean.
A neutral would guard the money, keep the lights on, and oversee a full rewrite of the bylaws so no one could weaponize vagueness again. The motion was seconded before he finished the sentence and passed by a wave of hands. We weren't just cleaning house, we were rebuilding the foundation.
I took the mic once more. One last fix. Let's kill porch piracy at the root. Parcel lockers by the clubhouse. Codes for each resident. Use reserves and be done with it. Applause answered for me. The vote was unanimous. As the meeting broke, neighbors I barely knew squeezed my shoulder, shook my hand, and told me their versions of the same story. They were tired of being bullied. I hadn't set out to be anyone's hero. I just wanted my sneakers back. But standing up once gave everybody else permission to stand up too. A month later, the neighborhood felt different, lighter. The court appointed a receiver, a no-nonsense woman who audited the books and started untangling Karen's pet projects from actual expenses. The parcel lockers went in, sleek, numbered, under cameras that met code and common sense. Deliveries became small celebrations instead of small risks. The criminal side wrapped quickly with the storage unit hole, GPS trail, porch video, and that glorious neon cameo. The case was airtight. Karen and her two rent-a-thugs took a plea. She faced real time and a mountain of restitution to residents and retailers. The muscle plead to assault and misuse of HOA funds. Grant, a minor, landed community service and a juvenile program. Within weeks, a for-sale sign sprouted in their lawn, tilting slightly in the wind like a surrender flag. Today, my phone pings. Locker number 27. I pop the door, bring home a box, and lace up fire-red cosmic comets while Mr. Henderson's tonal Discord wine chimes sing perfectly in key. No clipboards, no threats, just a neighborhood again. Turns out glitter sticks to more than fabric. It sticks to the truth. I didn't think a pair of shoes would kick off a revolt, but glitter has a way of sticking to what matters. We took back our porches, our mail, our meetings, and the laugh we'd been swallowing for years. The sneakers are just a bonus. The real win is that when boxes land in this neighborhood now, they land where they're meant to, inside our homes, not inside someone's scheme. I look down at the red comets and smile. My porch is safe. My packages are secure. And my feet have never felt better.